So, the Regency era, famous for Jane Austen, the Napoleonic Wars, being mistaken for the Victorian era, and apparently the last frost fair on the River Thames. Join me this week as I review Thin Ice. So in this week's episode, the TARDIS brings the Doctor and Bill to London in 1814, where the last big frost fair on the River Thames is being held. And there's something that's lurking beneath the River Thames, which is frozen over, which is actually eating people who fall through the ice. Now, I actually had to Google this, but apparently the frost fairs were actually a real thing, and there was one that was held in 1814. It did involve the River Thames being frozen over, and apparently there was an elephant. So there you go, that's something that I didn't know before. This episode was written by Sarah Dollard, who also wrote Face the Raven. Now, Face the Raven was one of my favourite episodes. It was Clara Oswald's swan song, or maybe that should be Raven's song. But it was one of my favourite episodes. I thought it was really well written, and I was excited to see what Sarah Dollard had to dish up for this episode. As a bonus point, Sarah Dollard is also an Australian like myself. I was actually at a Doctor Who festival a couple of years ago in Sydney. I'm listening to Mark Gatiss speak, and Mark Gatiss is another writer who writes for Doctor Who. And somebody in the audience actually asked him what you need to do to become a writer on Doctor Who. And one of the first things that Mark Gatiss said was, well, first of all, you have to move to England to write for Doctor Who. So obviously Sarah Dollard's done that. She's cracked the scene, made a name for herself. I thought the script for Thin Ice was really good. Maybe not quite as good as Face the Raven, but it was still like a really good episode and some really good writing. In this episode, Bill realises that the Doctor isn't exactly the kindly mentor and hero that she's assumed him to be up until this point. She learns that the Doctor has a more callous side to him. He's seen people die, he's actually killed people, and he's lost count of how many people he's seen die or killed. He's walked away from those deaths, he's moved on, and Bill realises this, and she's quite shocked and dismayed by it. Another thing that I also liked in this episode about Bill was how savvy she is. So she's genre savvy in the sense that she knows all sort of the sci-fi tropes. She knows about the butterfly effect. When we see her step onto the ice and the snow, she does so quite cautiously because she's conscious of the fact that if she steps on a butterfly, she might change the future or her future. There's also like a bit of a great joke in there from the Doctor about, Pete. Obviously there was no Pete, the Doctor's just sort of messing with Bill, but that was quite a funny moment. I also liked in the end how Bill actually does change the future, but it's for the better. In this episode, Bill is also concerned initially about being a black woman in early 19th century London, which is a very, very reasonable concern. As it turns out, however, the point is made that London back then was actually more black than what people thought it was. I thought that was like a really interesting point to make, and in the crowd we saw other black people, other people who looked as though they were from Asian or South Asian descent. I thought that was a really nice touch. Now, on the same subject of race, there's a moment where the Doctor punches the villain of the show, who's just said something very insulting to Bill. I think that's a moment that is going to have many fans cheering. I thought it was also interesting in the sense that it also shows the Doctor has a violent side to him. It's hidden deep down, but when he gets riled, it does come to the forefront. And something else that the punch scene showed was also how protective the Doctor can be of his companions. We know that the Doctor sometimes puts his companions in dangerous situations. He himself insults his companions. But if anybody else is rude or mean to one of his companions, woe betide them, because then you've got the Doctor angry. And I thought the punch scene was like really effective, and I think that it's a scene that's going to have many fans, you know, pumping their fists and cheering. I also liked in this episode the line that the Doctor gives when he's with Sutcliffe about how progress isn't measured by industry, but rather by the value that's placed on human lives, even the lives of people that we deem to be inferior to ours. I thought that was such a great line from the Doctor. It really sums up what he's all about. And I think also it was a great touch because giving that line kind of restored Bill's faith in the Doctor. So I thought that was like a really, really good scene. Another interesting part earlier in the episode was when the Doctor mentions that he doesn't like tattoos. On the surface it seemed like he was just saying that to establish a rapport with the guy that he was trying to get information from. But I thought it was an interesting line because the third Doctor, played by John Pertwee, actually did have a tattoo on his arm. The actor had a tattoo, which we saw briefly in one of Pertwee's early episodes. But I'm also wondering whether, even though the Doctor has forgotten about Clara, whether he still kind of has some echoes in his mind of the whole events of Face the Raven, and hence maybe subconsciously he doesn't like tattoos because of the whole Clara getting the chronolock tattoo on the back of her neck and then subsequently getting killed by the Raven. Who knows? But I just thought that it was a nice callback to Face the Raven. The main concern that I had about this episode was the ending. Now we've seen this scenario before where it turns out there's like a creature trapped or imprisoned somehow. The Doctor and his companion find a way to release the creature, and the creature basically goes off without harming anybody else. So we've kind of seen this situation before in episodes such as The Beast Below and Kill the Moon, and it also happened again in Thin Ice. My concern is that the Doctor places like a lot of faith in the fact that the creature will just basically go off without hurting anybody else, and this gamble always pays off. Now that's like a very positive message, but in this case I'm wondering how realistic it is. We've got this creature who's been imprisoned and chained below the Thames for thousands of years. It's feasted on human flesh, developed a taste for it presumably. And yet, when the Doctor and Bill find a way to release the creature, it basically swims off to Greenland or something without hurting anybody else. Now, this could just be me, but for once I'd like to see an episode of Doctor Who where they find a way to release the creature, only to have the creature turn on everybody, and for the Doctor to realise this made actually a really bad mistake in releasing the creature. I think that would be a far more interesting episode. Overall though, I thought this episode was pretty good. It was fun, it was entertaining, great production values. There was a lot happening. So this week I'm giving Thin Ice 4 out of 5 wombats. So next week we'll be looking at the 4th episode, Knock Knock. So join me next time. If you like this video, subscribe to my channel, give it a like, leave your thoughts below in the comments section, and I will see you next week.